Well, again, you know, how can you possibly report on the story when you're already using government propaganda? It's not safe. Yes, that's the problem. You're using the term they're using.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be taking a look at Pierre Poilievre going toe-to-toe with reporters yet again as he was delivering remarks in regards to the status of Canada and its crime situation. Now, he covers a multitude of things from car thefts to violent, non-violent crimes, the catch and release system, as well as drugs. And some of these reporters definitely rubbed him the wrong way, as you're going to see from this.
Thank you very much for coming, everyone. I'd like to start by offering my condolences to the family and loved ones of Brianna Broadfoot, who, a 17-year-old beautiful girl from London, killed by someone who had already been arrested, but for reasons I don't understand, was released to carry out domestic violence on her again. She is just the latest victim of the radical NDP wacko catch and release justice system, or I should say injustice system. It allows the same repeat violent offenders to go free again and again.
Now, surprisingly, I didn't hear too much about this story, but when I did look into it, it's very much true. This gentleman who was 18 attacked this 17-year-old girl. He strangled her and whatnot, was found guilty of it, but then was just essentially released with a restraining order.
Good evening, Carlisle. Court documents obtained by CTV News today reveal that Brianna Broadfoot was assaulted in a previous incident just this past March by 18-year-old Kookpa Moo at an address in East London. The documents reveal Moo lived at 86 Wellesley Crescent in London, the same location police responded to in last week's stabbing death of 17-year-old Broadfoot. The police report filed on March 14th alleges Moo committed assault on Broadfoot by choking and suffocating or strangling her. Moo appeared in court in April and was released with conditions not to communicate with Broadfoot or go anywhere within 50 meters of her.
Now, I find it absolutely wild that even though they found him guilty of assaulting this girl and the strangulation of her, all they did was slap him with a restraining order and say, stay 50 meters away from this young girl, as if nothing else was going to be done. Now, the gentleman in question was shot and killed by the police, which is good to hear that he's no longer out and about. But as Pierre continues talking, we're going to get into more and more crazy stats.
Justin Trudeau and the NDP told you all that it would work, that all the so-called experts agreed that freeing criminals onto the street 50, 60, 70 times within hours of their latest arrest would somehow make us all safer. Most Canadians thought it was wacko, and they were right. Today, the data is out from Stats Canada. Data released moments ago show that violent crime is up 50% after 9 years of Trudeau and the NDP Liberals. Homicides up 28%. Sexual assaults 75% higher. Violent firearm offenses up 116%, more than double. Extortion up 357% as small business owners get letters telling them that if they don't pay $1 million, there'll be a bullet flying through their 6-year-old daughter or son's bedroom window in the middle of the night. That's what's happening on our streets. Auto theft up 46%.
Now, you don't have to take Pierre's word for this. You can go look this up yourself. If you go to Stats Canada today, it was released July 25th. This was a whole new overview of everything. If you look right above me, crime severity index has gone up. Police reported crime gone up. Violent crime rate has gone up. The non-violent crime rate has also gone up. And the youth crime rate, look at this, has gone up. And so this whole policy of catch and release clearly is not working. Yet as we continue, we're going to get more and more into the clown show that is our justice system.
This is the direct result of NDP Liberal catch and release policies that turn the same repeat offenders loose on our streets again and again and again. Just last week, we saw a story of 18 offenders charged with 150 crimes. 9 of them were already out on some sort of early release, and since their arrest, 6 of them have been released again. And what do you know? They're out doing more and more crime. A very tiny group of criminals doing all the crime. Even the justice minister has had his car stolen 3 times. Incredible. You'd think the criminals would be somewhat grateful that he keeps releasing them. But no, they steal his car too, and he is too dense to figure out that they should be locked up. This is the same guy who said that crime wasn't rising, it was just a perception. He said that Canadians were just believing crazy conspiracy theories about crime, and that the smart people who stare at screens and look at spreadsheets knew better. Well, now the spreadsheets are out, and they confirm that catch and release, wacko NDP Liberal policies have caused one of the worst crime waves in Canadian history.
Now, the interesting part of what Pierre is talking about is when Minister Varani made that statement, which was almost a year ago to the day, he stated, Canada's new Justice Minister said on Monday that the government will act to address the heightened sense of insecurity felt by certain sections of the population, though empirically it is unlikely Canadians are less safe from crime, he said. However, even when this was released, again back in July of 2023, this article states, according to Stats Canada, the country's police-reported crime rate increased 5% from the year prior, with violent crime increasing 2%. However, Minister Varani says, I think that empirically it's unlikely Canada is becoming less safe. And when we go to the other story that Pierre was talking about, the 18 charged with 150 offenses, the Toronto Sun just covered this. These are some of the ones that are being charged for all this. But if you're not a fan of the Toronto Sun, City News, CTV, all of the other outlets also covered this, as you're going to see in this video.
150 charges have been leveled against 18 people. This is all part of Project Warlock in Peel Region, cracking down on car thefts and home invasions. Our Shauna Hunt tracking this story for us today. Shauna, a disturbing trend. We are hearing the youngest suspect just 14 years old. What else are you learning?
Linked to a series of violent crimes that were happening in Mississauga. So, you know, we're talking about armed carjackings, knife point robberies, violent home invasions. In fact, in one case, a resident, a victim of a home invasion, was shot at and suffered very serious injuries. Now, police say they spent thousands of hours collecting evidence, and eventually they arrested 18 people, 3 of which are young offenders, as you mentioned, and one of those was a 14-year-old boy. We're also learning that 9 suspects are already out on bail. They've already been released on bail, and that 6 of those suspects were out on bail when they were taken into custody. And Peel's police chief says this continues to be a problem. Have a listen.
The harm that is being caused by releasing individuals versus the risk of keeping them in custody is disconnected. And we're seeing individuals, you know, we've seen the auto theft cases where somebody's been involved with a violent carjacking, they're in a courtroom, they're released, and they steal a car in the parking lot of a courtroom. That happens right here in Peel. Or they're back out committing an offense.
If you think that sounds absolutely stupid, well, there was confirmation of this story. And the individual who talked about this actually said that they're getting fed up with the federal government, and they're asking them to take a harder look at this whole catch and release revolving door situation.
And I wanted to top that up as well. Thank you very much for your question, and you've mentioned it before. You know, it's got to be a tough job when you're enforcement and you do everything you do to achieve this, and then you find out a day later they're on the streets. As you know, it's been a topic of great discussion in the region of Peel and around my table. And I want to give a shout out to Mayor Brown of Brampton and one of my regional colleagues who's gone so far as to go to Ottawa and tell them something has to be done with this revolving door justice. You know, it sounds like a joke. We've talked about the problems with the car thefts. What actually happened here in our GTA jurisdiction? Some guy's up before a judge for having stolen a car, gets let off, and went into the parking lot of the courthouse and stole another car. You can't make this stuff up. And that's what gets people frustrated. But can you imagine what it does to our enforcement people that say, here we are doing what it takes, the countless hours, efforts, energy, risk, and then we find out it's a bit of a catch and release system. I must tell you, because you asked the question, I'm glad, It is top of mind concern for my council and our mayors that everybody involved from the federal government on down needs to have a cold, hard look at what it is when we allow people who are the perpetrators of crime to freely go out, and the record shows commit more crime while they're waiting for a hearing date. Something's got to give there, and my heart goes out to the victims and to the people in uniform that say, they must want to beat their heads against the wall when they get home some nights and say, what is the point of this if I know these people are back out on the street? So thank you very much for your question. I know it is being reviewed in earnest, but we need stronger results on that file, especially from our federal partners.
Now, I'd be curious to hear, with all this new information that's coming out in the federal government being contacted by all these police forces, if Minister Varani would still say that empirically it's unlikely that Canada is unsafe. When we get back into the press conference with Pierre, he starts to talk about guns and how the Liberal NDP banned hunting rifles, thinking that it would bring down gun violence. Surprise, surprise, it hasn't. But then he starts talking about drugs and this new Liberal NDP plan that they have or had in regards to decriminalizing drugs.
We see the chaos here in London with tent cities popping up everywhere. Now, this is obviously partly the result of the NDP Liberals doubling your housing costs, but also the giving out drugs, taxpayer-funded opioids that are ending up in the hands of kids, despite the lies of those who are in the system who are profiting from it, are making the drug problem even worse. And now we learn that the NDP Liberal government had a secret document planning national decriminalization. They tried to keep it under wraps until after the next election, hoping Canadians would not find out. But Blacklock's reporter got their hands on the document, and it showed a secret scheme to legalize crack, heroin, cocaine, and other hard drugs, which, if Trudeau and the NDP are reelected, will be as easy to get in your neighborhood as a candy bar at a corner store.
Now, when I did some very superficial digging, I will be honest with you on that, in regards to what Pierre's talking about, I did come across Blacklock's reporter. However, this national decrim article, you have to either be a member, so log in, or subscription based. Clearly, I'm not. However, it states the cabinet was willing to use all tools at our disposal under the drug policy, including national decrim, says the federal document. And as you can see in the picture here, Yara Sachs, she actually responded to this saying, "Conservatives want you to believe that there's a secret plan for national decriminalization. The reality is they made it up again. There is no plan for national decrim." Now, the comment section is not really going in her favor. A lot of people are citing the Blacklock's report, and even some people are saying, "Can you post the documents that you claim clear this all up? Thanks." Now, again, as I've mentioned, I didn't really do too much digging into this, so maybe there will be more information that comes out. Hopefully, we'll get an actual solid answer on this. But as we're going to continue now, we're going to get into the reporter section. Pierre does talk a little bit more. I'll leave that in the description below if you want to check out the full thing. But some of these questions from the reporters are just really stupid, especially the first one where he asks Pierre if there's any proof that kids are getting their hands on drugs, even though there has been article and story written about this extensively.
Could you point us to evidence showing that drugs that are given out for free are ending up in the hands of children?
Oh, I don't have to. You just have to ask the police, and even the so-called experts have now been caught on television or on tape saying that they're being diverted. And in BC, the Public Health Authority, which has been a great advocate of this radical scheme, has admitted that it's ending up in the hands of children. Adam Zivo from the National Post has done intrepid reporting on this, where he's shown that the cost of a hydromorphine tablet has dropped on the street, has dropped by like 95%, because as soon as the addicts get the drugs, they resell it so they can buy something more potent. And it has being handed off to kids. So look at what the public health activists, and even there's one so-called doctor here in town who was caught on tape admitting that there's diversion of those drugs. So the evidence is in, and it's final. And I would also encourage the media to be more responsible. It is just so irresponsible for you to go and quote people who profit from the ongoing drug crisis as though they are experts. They are not experts. If they were experts, their policies, which have been implemented over the last 9 years, would not have caused 40,000 deaths, would not have seen an over 100% increase in opioid overdoses. The last thing they want is for the crisis to end, because they're making so much money off of it. We've got to stop feeding the activist class and start providing treatment and recovery. I would encourage you, if you're going to cover this drug issue, stop talking to the people who caused the problem. Start talking to the recovery centers. I would ask, why don't you ask the people, when you interview them, why don't you ask them, how many people have you got off drugs? Call them up, the local public health authorities, ask them how many people they've gotten off of drugs. Because it's interesting, the media rewards these people for the carnage that they're causing. You call them experts. They're not experts. They're expert only at one thing, and that is perpetuating the drug crisis. Their policies have been implemented for the last 9 years, and we see the results. The experts are the people at places like Harvest House in Ottawa or the Oak Centre in Winnipeg, where they bring people in and get them off of drugs. Let's start quoting them as the experts. Thank you.
Like, what an absolute clown show that reporter is. How could he come here this seemingly unprepared with such a stupid question like that when, yeah, it's been reported extensively. There are from the CBC, CTV, as he mentioned, National Post. I'm sure you could, again, talk to local authorities there. They're talking about how drug overdoses is becoming one of the highest things that are killing kids 10 and up because they're getting their hands on drugs. We've already covered this on other videos. I can link that in the description below, but this is such a dumb question to come out as to ask Pierre. But the next question, which I think the answer was brilliant to, actually comes from one of our independent journalists here from the True North, Andrew Lawton. He asks a fantastic question, and Pierre, in my opinion, gives one of the best answers I've ever heard in a very long time.
Thank you. Next question.
Good morning, Andrew Lawton, True North. I know you're familiar with Alberta's approach to drugs, which similarly to you is very much against so-called safe supply. But they have proposed a forced intervention, and in some cases really using the mechanisms of law to push drug users into treatment under certain conditions. Would you support something like that nationally?
I don't know. I need to study it more. I need to understand how it would work. I want everybody who's on drugs to be in treatment and rehab to get off drugs. What I haven't been able to figure out is, if someone doesn't want to be rehabilitated, can you require them to be? I don't know. I'd like to see some evidence for and against before I make a judgment. Tracy Gray from BC is an MP in our caucus, a common sense conservative, who's proposed that we have treatment in the prisons and that judges have the ability to make it a part of a sentence that drug-related offenses have drug treatment as part of the sentence, so that the offender perhaps they were involved in theft. We know the theft was linked to their addiction. The judge could say, while you're in prison, you're required to be drug-free, and we're going to provide you with high-quality treatment behind bars. That makes sense to me, because they're already going to be in prison anyway. They might as well be cleaning up their body and their souls and their addictions. But I don't know if you can take someone off the street who has not committed a prison offense and successfully rehabilitate them. If we can, I'm open to it, but I'd need to see more evidence at this point.
Now, as I said, the way he answered this with those three opening words, "I don't know," that is amazing. It's very rare that you hear, especially a politician or anyone like that, saying, "I don't know," and openly admitting that he doesn't really understand, he hasn't looked into it enough. He's willing to, as you said, he's got to look more into the pros and the cons of the whole situation. And yeah, what he was saying makes sense. If somebody already has to fulfill a sentence, if you could tie it, maybe they have to do rehab with the sentence, that's great. But forcing people outside of that, yeah, that would be a little bit of a murky situation. But flat out saying, "I don't know," openly admitting that, that has to be one of the best answers. And I actually respect that a whole lot more than him trying to sugarcoat it or give us some sort of song and dance about something that he has no knowledge on. But as we move into the next question, I think this is another independent news outlet, maybe from the local area, and they talk about how the cost of getting people into rehab is so high, and what Pierre would do for that. And he touches upon it a little bit in reallocating money for the funds from Safe Supply to these places, but also says that he'll expand a little bit more as they get closer to the election.
Thank you. Next question.
Craig Needles from Blackburn Media. You mentioned some of those rehab centers and the work that's being done there. How would you go about getting more of those open and in a timely manner as well? Because there are people who are using Safe Supply right now that if all that was just cut off all of a sudden, they would be in a very difficult situation. It could be a life and death situation when it comes to withdrawals. So how would you be able to do this quickly? Because OHIP-funded rehab is still very difficult to find. And a lot of these people are clearly struggling financially.
That's a very good point. It is too hard to find right now. And that's why a lot of people don't get help. They try, they call a 1-800 number, they dig around, family members go scrounging around to try and find out what's available. They're then told that it's $40,000 to put someone in a treatment, Sebastian, in a treatment facility. So I appreciate that it's very hard for people to get into these programs. But that's why we need to repurpose the money that's now being spent on unsafe supply and harm production and fund the treatment facilities so that they can expand. We have treatment facilities. The problem is there are not enough of them. So, if you went to the places that have proven track records of getting people off drugs, and you said, if we repurpose some of the money we're already spending, could you expand your service to more people? That I think is the best way to do it. And as I would do across government, I think we should pay for results. We should pay organizations that actually get results. The result is to get people off drugs. And as we get closer to the election, we will have more details on how we will repurpose those dollars to put them into treatment and recovery to bring our loved ones home drug-free. Thank you.
And there you have a very common sense, straightforward approach. Take the money from the drugs, put it in the rehab, and he's taking the same approach that he was doing with the housing and other aspects, whereas if they prove that they can produce better results, then they'll get more money. If they don't, then they'll get less money, I guess. But now we get into where Pierre really goes off in talking about the government propaganda that everybody loves espouting. And I don't know if this is because it's CTV News and Pierre does not like them or what, but he really goes into them. And I'm just going to let the clip play.
Good morning, Jonathan from CTV News. Just along the lines of what you've been talking about already this morning, Mr. Polyev, in regards to drawing kind of a tough line of what your party is proposing. Scott Cortese is with the London Area Community Health Center, just located over here. During the police announcement, which I know your party is very familiar with, said that he wants a little time to come up with better protocols, better options, better avenues. Is there any compromise here? You've drawn quite a line this morning, but is there any compromise opportunity where you could work with some of these folks, come up with a modified plan, or is there strictly one option here in your mind?
Are you talking, on what subject? Are we talking now drugs or crime?
I'm talking safe supplies.
Well, again, how can you possibly report on the story when you're already using government propaganda? It's not safe. Yes, that's the problem. You're using the term they're using. How can you? So you've decided, you've already made up your mind, you're going to report their statements as though they're true. Well, why are you using their language?
That's the language being used in various news conferences and other policies.
Oh, yes,
Sure.
there are, of
However,
course. So
sir,
you're
I'm
just being force-fed talking points by the authorities who caused the problem in the first place. This is exactly the problem. This is exactly the problem. It's exactly the problem.
The London Police using the same terminology.
How's it working?
So I'm just asking you to answer the question of whether or not there's any room to work with these other agencies or not, or whether you're going to stick to your proposals, which are your proposals. That's all I'm asking, sir.
My proposal is recovery and treatment. Am I going to give more money to these agencies that have caused the crisis? No. They're not going to get any more money. They've caused the mayhem. Have you been around? Have you seen the tent cities?
I lived in this very neighborhood for 8 years.
Have you seen the tent cities?
Yes, I've seen it.
Okay, and you think that these agencies are doing a good job?
I think there's, sir, it's not my job to debate a federal leader on this issue, sir, but I will say that.
I'm asking you a question. Are you think they're doing a good job when you go to see the tent cities that are popping up everywhere in the country?
The community is doing the best job.
I agree with you on that, the community, but the agencies are different than the community. And again, you're repeating their talking points. I mean, there was a time when reporters believed their job was to hold government accountable, not regurgitate their talking points. And that's what you're doing when you say safe supply. It's heroin-grade opioids that they want to give out. And it is being diverted to kids. It's not safe. Since this policy was enacted, we have seen overdose rates more than double across Canada. And where these policies have been most enthusiastically embraced, like British Columbia, it's 400%. I don't understand how the media goes to the same agencies and public health bureaucrats who helped cause the crisis and calls them the experts, when in fact the results of their policies are plain for all eyes to see. There's 256 homeless encampments in Toronto now. 50 of them have opened up in 3 months alone. The 25% of Canadians are living in poverty. We've had 40,000 people die of drug overdoses. The approach that we're taking, that the NDP Liberals and the bureaucracies that they employ are taking, is only making things worse. I will be taking that money and giving it to treatment and recovery services, not more drugs. Frankly, these NDP Liberal bureaucrats and activists who have been sucking up all the money are responsible for the crisis. We saw in BC, the public health authority there wants to make drugs available in corner stores everywhere. They want to have something called compassion clubs where the government would give drugs out for people, to drug distributors who would wander around giving them out freely to anybody who wants them. This is why we're in the mess. We need a drastic departure from the nightmare that the radical, wacko, NDP Liberal agenda has caused in our streets. We need to lock up hardened criminals. We need treatment and recovery. We need to ban hard drugs. We need to bring our loved ones home drug-free. Thank you.
And on that note, there's not much else to say, so we'll just end the video there for today. This justice system definitely needs to be reformed, and if the Liberals don't do it before they leave, hopefully the Conservatives get to it as soon as they get in power, because it's getting a little bit crazy out there with this catch and release system. But as always, this is just my opinion. I'd love to hear from you guys, so please let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. Do apologize, it was a little bit longer than normal, but there was a lot to cover. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.